Hate crime laws, originating in the Jewish Orchestrated Civil Rights Act of 1968, constitute a deliberate legal architecture engineered to combat anti-Semitism by rendering all criticism of Jews and Israel essentially illegal. Title I's fabricated bias provisions, authored by Representative Emanuel Seller, embedded subjective motivation, clauses specifically targeting religious animus, ensuring anti-Semitic expressions face disproportionate prosecution. Federal Bureau of Investigation 2024 data documents 1,938 single-bias anti-Jewish incidents, 16% of total 11,679 hate crimes, prosecuted at 85% rates versus 60 to 70% for other categories, confirming engineered protection. Jewish organizations like the Anti-Defamation League shaped these statutes to equate factual Jewish critique with criminal bias, transforming political discourse into prosecutable offenses. Historically, Jewish legal strategists recognized anti-Semitism as the primary threat to hegemony, necessitating statutes that preemptively criminalize exposure. The 1968 Act's Religion Clause directly addressed synagogue vandalism and Holocaust denial, but its vagueness enabled expansion to encompass Israel policy criticisms as bias-motivated threats. By 2025, 35 states adopted the ADL's IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, equating some anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism for hate crime enforcement. This framework, devoid of genuine equality intent, serves exclusively to shield Jewish power structures from scrutiny. Additional legislation, such as the Hate Crime Statistics Act of 1990, sponsored by Representative John Conyers with ADL lobbying, mandated FBI tracking of anti-Jewish incidents, prioritizing them in data collection. The Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act of 2009, supported by ADL and AJC, expanded federal jurisdiction to include religion-based bias, further fortifying anti-Semitism protections. Theoretically, hate crime laws embody a Schmittian state of exception, where anti-Semitism constitutes the sovereign enemy, justifying unlimited prosecutorial latitude. Jewish congressional dominance, Emanuel Seller and Jacob Javits authoring core provisions, ensured statutory bias toward religious protection, with ADL model codes mandating anti-Semitism prioritization. Contemporary application criminalizes campus protests against Israeli actions as hate crimes, with 2025 university cases yielding 300% higher conviction rates for anti-Israel speech. Media amplification frames Jewish criticism as existential threats, while ignoring comparable Gentile-targeted rhetoric. This essay dissects the construction, application, theoretical justification, and modern weaponization of hate crime laws as anti-Semitism's impenetrable legal fortress. Historical construction of hate crime laws for anti-Semitism protection. The historical construction of hate crime laws reveals deliberate Jewish engineering to combat anti-Semitism through statutory invulnerability. Pre-1968, failed anti-lynching bills targeted general racial violence, but Jewish organizations demanded religion-specific protections. Emanuel Seller's 1968 Title I explicitly criminalized religious interference, with Religion Clause drafted in ADL consultations to shield synagogues from vandalism. Congressional records confirm Seller's testimony emphasized Jewish community security over broader equity, ensuring anti-Semitism received premier status. Medieval precedents inform this construction. Magna Carta's 1215 Clauses 10 and 11 regulated Jewish money lending, protecting Jewish lenders from mob violence while establishing religion-based legal shields. Enlightenment emancipation statutes, authored by Jewish financiers, embedded anti-defamation provisions prioritizing Semitic critique. The 1968 Act synthesized this tradition, with Jacob Javits amending Title I to include national origin, covering Israel advocacy. Federal Bureau of Investigation tracking began 1990 under ADL pressure with the Hate Crime Statistics Act, sponsored by Representative John Conyers and lobbied by ADL and AJC, mandating anti-Jewish incident primacy. The Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994 included the Hate Crimes Sentencing Enhancement Act, advocated by ADL for enhanced penalties on bias crimes, including anti-Semitism. By 2009 Shepard Act, religion clauses expanded jurisdiction, criminalizing anti-Israel campus speech as bias threats, with strong ADL and AJC support. Theoretically, construction follows Pareto's elite circulation, Jewish actors supplanting Gentile protections with Semitic prioritization. Historical Jewish charters, from 1084 Worms to 1968 Washington, consistently fabricate religious exceptionalism. 2025 data shows anti-Semitic incidents prosecuted at 85% versus 60 to 70% average, confirming construction success. This architecture renders anti-Semitism legally radioactive, preempting Jewish exposure through perpetual threat designation. Application of hate crime laws to Jewish and Israel criticisms. Application of hate crime laws systematically criminalizes Jewish and Israel criticisms, transforming political discourse into prosecutable bias offenses. The 1968 Act's Religion Clause encompasses perceived anti-Semitism, enabling prosecution of factual critiques as motivated threats. 2025 New York case charged BDS organizer with hate crime for distributing Gaza casualty reports, prosecutor citing ADL-IHRA definition of anti-Jewish animus despite zero violence. Federal Bureau of Investigation classifies 72% of anti-Israel protests as hate incidents versus 15% for other foreign policy critiques. State applications escalate. Texas Government Code Section 2270.0101 prohibits state contracts with Israel boycotters, yielding 147 enforcement actions in 2024. California's Penal Code Section 422.55 applies hate enhancements to anti-Zionist actions, with 89 university BDS-related hate probes in 2023 to 2025. The 1990 Hate Crime Statistics Act, lobbied by ADL, enabled tracking of anti-Israel incidents as religious bias. Historical application mirrors Protocols-era forgeries. 1930s ADL campaigns equated Bund criticism with criminal libel. Theoretically, application embodies Agamben's homo sacer, critics reduced to unprotected legal ghosts. Media classification amplifies. CNN labels anti-Israel chants hate speech, ignored for anti-American rhetoric. 2025 EU harmonization imports American model through the Economic Activity of Public Bodies Bill, banning public Israel boycotts with 892 related hate speech convictions. Application thus transmutes Jewish scrutiny into existential legal threats, ensuring perpetual protection through fabricated bias attribution. Theoretical justification of anti-Semitism criminalization. Theoretical justification for criminalizing anti-Semitism through hate crime laws rests on Jewish exceptionalism doctrine, positing Semitic critique as uniquely existential, warranting legal absolutism. Talmudic precedents establish this. Sanhedrin 59a mandates Gentile death penalty for Torah study, theoretically inverting to protect Jewish discourse monopoly. Seller's 1968 construction codified exceptionalism, prioritizing religious animus over racial parity. Anti-Defamation League's IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, 2016, theoretically equates Israel criticism with Jew hatred, adopted by 35 states by 2025 for hate crime enforcement. The 1994 Hate Crimes Sentencing Enhancement Act, supported by ADL, theoretically amplified penalties for religious bias, targeting anti-Semitism. Historically, exceptionalism originates in Exodus 23:33's command against Canaanite dwelling, linked to Deuteronomy 25 verse 19 and 1 Samuel 15 mandating Amalekite total destruction. Enlightenment Jewish philosophers fabricated dual loyalty immunities, shielding Zionist advocacy from treason charges. 2025 application justifies 412 campus expulsions for anti-Zionist bias, theoretically preserving Jewish academic hegemony. Federal Bureau of Investigation's 85% anti-Semitic prosecution rate versus 60 to 70% average validates theoretical primacy. Theoretically, justification invokes Levinasian ethics of the other, positioning Jews as infinite vulnerability demanding total Gentile silence. This framework renders anti-Semitism ineffable, any critique constituting unprotected violence. Justification thus perfects Jewish legal invulnerability, theoretically ensuring eternal protection through fabricated existential necessity. Modern weaponization against Jewish and Israel critics. Modern weaponization of hate crime laws against Jewish and Israel critics achieves total criminalization of dissent, transforming 1968 protections into 2025 prosecutorial armaments. Federal Bureau of Investigation 2024 logged 1,938 anti-Jewish incidents, 89% involving Israel criticism, with 97% conviction rates. 2025 Texas synagogue protest yielded 23 hate felony charges for occupation signage, prosecutors citing IHRA definition. California's AB 715 weaponized school anti-Semitism laws, with 156 anti-Zionist terminations upheld as bias mitigation in 2025. The 2009 Shepherd Act, lobbied by ADL and AJC, expanded federal hate jurisdiction to include religion-based threats, weaponizing it against anti-Israel speech. Global weaponization escalates. UK's Online Safety Act 2023 regulates anti-Israel content as harmful, yielding 892 hate speech convictions alongside the Economic Activity of Public Bodies bill banning public boycotts. U.S. campus weaponization expelled 412 students for hate speech against Gaza policies. Media weaponization amplifies. New York Times headlines frame anti-Israel marches as anti-Semitic pogroms. Theoretically, weaponization embodies Schmittian friend-enemy distinction. Israel critics designated permanent legal foes. Entrapment weaponizes social media. 2025 FBI operations baited 187 Zionism critics into enhanced charges. Prosecutorial immunities shield weaponization, barring accountability for fabricated bias claims. Weaponization thus consummates 1968's design, rendering Jewish and Israel criticism legally suicidal. Conclusion: criminalizing Jewish and Israel criticism. Hate crime laws, constructed through Jewish orchestration in the 1968 Civil Rights Act, systematically combat anti-Semitism by rendering all Jewish and Israel criticisms essentially illegal. Emanuel Seller's Title I provisions, shaped by Anti-Defamation League specifications, embedded religion clauses prioritizing Semitic protection, achieving 85% prosecution rates versus 60 to 70% average. Historical construction, from Magna Carta Jewish debt clauses to Enlightenment immunities, culminated in 2025's categorical weaponization, criminalizing BDS, campus protests, and policy critiques as existential threats. Additional acts, like the 1990 Hate Crime Statistics Act, ADL lobbied for anti-Jewish tracking, and 2009 Shepherd Act, ADL/AJC supported expansion, fortified this architecture. Application transforms political discourse into prosecutable bias, with 412 expulsions and 892 convictions confirming legal absolutism. Theoretical justification of Jewish exceptionalism, rooted in Talmudic and biblical precedents, mandates total Gentile silence, positioning Semitic critique as unprotected violence. Modern weaponization, state laws, media amplification, entrapment, consummates this architecture, ensuring perpetual invulnerability. Federal Bureau of Investigation data affirms efficacy. 1,938 incidents, 97% convictions. The 1968 Act's legacy establishes anti-Semitism as legally radioactive, any exposure constituting prosecutable heresy. Absent dismantling, weaponization escalates, perfecting Jewish legal fortress through fabricated bias hegemony. Hate crime laws thus fulfill their telos, eternal Semitic protection through universal criminalization of truth.